Have you ever watched a child retreat so deep into silence that even their own father becomes a stranger? What you're about to hear will change how you think about grief healing and the power of a simple lullaby. Contrary to what most people believe, it wasn't the $75,000 worth of speech therapists, child psychologists, or grief counselors that brought 5-year-old Emma back to the world. It was something far simpler, something that money can't buy. I've researched hundreds of cases involving childhood selective mutism, and this story reveals something profound about human connection. By the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the most healing thing we can offer a broken heart isn't expertise or technology, but presence, patience, and a voice that reminds them they're loved. Emma went from 8 months of complete silence to singing along with her new nanny, proving that love speaks louder than any therapy manual ever written. If you skip this story, you'll miss the moment that shows why the simplest gestures often create the most extraordinary miracles. The silence in Richard Morrison's Manhattan penthouse was deafening. Not the peaceful quiet of a well-ordered home, but the hollow emptiness of a family torn apart by grief. 8 months ago, tech billionaire Richard had lost his wife Sarah to cancer. 8 months ago, his 5-year-old daughter Emma had spoken her last words at her mother's funeral. "When is Mommy coming home?" She hadn't spoken since. Richard stood in the doorway of Emma's bedroom, watching his daughter arrange her toys in perfect rows. The same toys, the same pattern, every single day. No laughter, no chatter, no questions that used to fill their home with life. Emma had been the brightest, most talkative child, always singing the lullabies her mother taught her, always asking why about everything she saw. The memories of their old life felt like scenes from someone else's story. Sarah curled up with Emma for bedtime stories, their voices creating harmonies that drifted through the halls. Emma's endless stream of questions during breakfast. Why is the sky blue? Where do dreams come from? How do flowers know when to grow? Sarah's patient answers, her gentle laughter when Emma asked the same question for the 10th time. Now their home felt like a museum of lost happiness. Emma's art supplies sat untouched on her craft table. The piano in the living room gathered dust Sarah used to play, while Emma danced around the room, spinning in circles until she collapsed in giggles. The kitchen island where they'd bake cookies together every Sunday was now just a cold marble surface where the housekeeper left Emma's untouched meals. Emma moved through their luxury home like a ghost, eating mechanically, attending school without speaking to teachers or friends, retreating to her room the moment Richard came home from work. She went through the motions of living without any spark of the joyful child she'd once been. The house staff, Maria the housekeeper, James the driver, Mrs. Patterson the cook, walked on eggshells around her. They whispered in hallways, their faces etched with concern for the little girl who used to greet them with hugs and endless chatter about her day. "She used to tell me every detail about her dreams," Maria confided to Richard one evening. "Now she just stares at her cereal until it gets soggy." Richard threw himself into work to escape the crushing weight of his own grief. But every evening when he returned to their empty home, the guilt consumed him. Board meetings and investor calls filled his days, creating a blessed distraction from the reality waiting at home. But when he walked through their front door and heard nothing, no running footsteps, no excited calls of Daddy's home, the silence hit him like a physical blow. He was failing as a father. His little girl needed him, and he had no idea how to reach her. Every attempt at connection seemed to push her further away. When he tried to read her bedtime stories, she would turn toward the wall. When he suggested activities they used to enjoy, she would simply walk away. When he asked about her day, the silence stretched between them like an ocean. Sarah had been the heart of their family, the one who knew how to comfort Emma's fears, celebrate her discoveries, and navigate the complex emotions of childhood. Without her, Richard felt like he was speaking a language Emma no longer understood. He'd tried everything money could buy. Dr. Patricia Wells, Manhattan's most renowned child psychologist, charged $15,000 a month for intensive therapy sessions. She brought expensive therapeutic toys, advanced play therapy techniques, and a wall full of degrees. Emma would sit in her office for an hour, staring at the wall in complete silence, while Dr. Wells tried every technique in her arsenal. Emma is processing severe trauma, Dr. Wells explained after 3 months of failed sessions. I recommend more intensive intervention. Perhaps residential treatment would be beneficial. The speech therapy team cost $8,000 monthly. They equipped Emma with electronic communication devices, colorful visual boards, and conducted elaborate vocal exercises. Emma would touch the pictures when prompted, but never made a sound. The lead therapist, Mrs. Chen, demonstrated breathing techniques and voice warm-ups that Emma followed mechanically, like a robot going through motions. Some children take longer to progress, Mrs. Chen said diplomatically. We're seeing small improvements in her willingness to participate. Richard saw no improvements at all. The grief counselor specialist charged $12,000 a month for their comprehensive program. They tried art therapy, where Emma drew the same picture repeatedly, a house with 2 stick figures instead of 3. They attempted sand play therapy group sessions with other grieving children, even consultations about anxiety medication. Emma participated without resistance, but also without engagement, as if she was physically present, but emotionally somewhere else entirely. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening when Richard found Emma's latest school art project on the kitchen counter. The assignment was, draw your family. Emma had drawn herself alone, a small figure standing in front of a big house, no other people anywhere in the picture. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had called that afternoon. Emma sits alone at lunch every day, she'd explained gently. She doesn't play with the other children. We're concerned about her social development. That night, Richard sat in his home office surrounded by bills from therapists, reports from specialists, and recommendations for even more expensive treatments. His pediatrician had warned about developmental regression. His mother-in-law called daily, asking if Emma was getting better. His business partners suggested boarding school might be easier for everyone. He was losing his daughter, and all his wealth, all his resources, all his connections to the best professionals in New York couldn't help him save her. The next morning, Richard made a decision. If the experts couldn't reach Emma, maybe someone who could provide round-the-clock care and attention could. He called the most exclusive nanny agency in Manhattan and requested their most experienced caregiver for traumatized children. We have someone perfect, the agency director assured him. Grace Washington, 20 years of experience, exceptional references, especially with children who've experienced loss. Richard didn't ask about Grace's credentials or training. At this point, he was willing to try anything that might bring his little girl back to him. Grace Washington arrived on a Monday morning carrying a small suitcase and the warmest smile Richard had seen in months. At 45, she had the kind of presence that immediately put people at ease. Gentle eyes, soft voice, and an unhurried way of moving that suggested patience was her greatest strength. Mr. Morrison, she said, extending her hand. I'm Grace. I'm here to help Emma, and I'm here to help you. Richard led her through the penthouse, explaining everything they'd tried. The failed therapy sessions, the expensive equipment, the mounting frustration of watching his daughter slip further away, despite having access to the best resources money could buy. The psychologist thinks Emma needs residential treatment, Richard explained as they walked through the elegant halls lined with family photos from happier times. The speech therapist wants to try electronic communication devices. The grief counselor recommended medication for anxiety. I'm running out of options. Grace listened without judgment, occasionally asking gentle questions. How long were you and Sarah married? What was Emma's favorite thing to do with her mother? Did she have any special routines or traditions? When they reached Emma's bedroom, they could see the little girl had hidden in her walk-in closet, clutching a stuffed white bunny. The closet had become her sanctuary. Sarah's clothes still hung there, and Emma would often bury her face in the fabric, breathing in the fading scent of her mother's perfume. Tell me about Emma before, Grace said quietly, settling into the reading chair by the window. Tell me about her mother. Richard's voice broke as he described their old life. Sarah's bedtime routine, how she'd sing lullabies every night, creating different voices for each song, making up silly verses that would send Emma into fits of giggles. How their home used to be filled with music and laughter, with Emma's constant chatter and Sarah's patient responses to endless questions. Emma knew every word to at least 20 songs. Richard remembered his eyes growing distant. She'd perform concerts for us standing on the coffee table like it was a stage. Sarah would record videos on her phone. His voice trailed off. Sarah recorded lullabies on her phone when she got too weak to sing. Richard whispered, I haven't been able to listen to them. I thought it would make things worse for Emma, hearing her mother's voice, when she can't have her mother back. Grace placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Grief isn't something we get over, Mr. Morrison. It's something we learn to carry with love. Sometimes the things that hurt us most are also the things that can heal us. That first day, Grace didn't try to coax Emma out of the closet. Instead, she sat quietly in the bedroom, humming softly while organizing Emma's books. She brought simple activities from her bag: coloring books, wooden puzzles, picture books with worn covers, but never insisted Emma participate. Grace talked naturally about everyday things: the weather, the birds outside the window, the cookies she'd baked for her own grandchildren back in Atlanta. She shared stories about her daughter, who loved to paint her son, who collected rocks, her youngest, who insisted on wearing his superhero costume to grocery stores. I had 3 children, Grace explained to the seemingly empty closet. They all grieved differently when their daddy passed. Some children talk about their feelings, some children draw them, and some children need quiet time to feel them in their hearts. Emma remained hidden, but Grace noticed everything. The stuffed bunny was clearly special. Emma held it constantly, and Grace could see it was handmade, probably by Sarah. There was a framed photo of Sarah on the nightstand that Emma touched every morning when she thought no one was watching. Sarah's jewelry box sat on the dresser, and Emma would open it periodically throughout the day, listening to the tiny ballerina spin to Für Elise. Grace understood. Emma wasn't just grieving, she was waiting. Waiting for her mother to come back. Waiting for life to return to normal. Waiting for the impossible to become possible again. Over the next 2 weeks, Grace established gentle routines that honored Emma's need for space while creating opportunities for connection. She learned Emma's favorite foods from Mrs. Patterson and prepared them with special care: star-shaped sandwiches cut with cookie cutters, fruit arranged into rainbow patterns, pancakes shaped like flowers. Grace discovered that Emma loved books about animals, so she brought stories about brave rabbits and singing birds. She found that Emma responded to certain colors: soft blues and purples seemed to calm her, while bright reds and oranges made her withdraw further. During story time, Grace read the same books Sarah used to read, carefully mimicking the voices Emma's mother had created for different characters. She found Sarah's collection of children's books on the shelf, each one marked with sticky notes in Sarah's handwriting. Emma's favorite: read with funny voice. Always request this one twice. Grace respected Emma's need for solitude while staying nearby, always available, but never demanding. She would sit in the reading chair, crocheting baby blankets for her church's nursery, humming softly while Emma played quietly nearby. What exactly is your training? Richard asked one evening, watching Grace and Emma sit together in comfortable silence. Emma was coloring at her small table while Grace worked on her knitting, and for the first time in months, the scene looked almost normal. Life, Grace replied simply. I raised 3 children as a single mother after my husband passed when I was 28. I've been helping families for 20 years. I have a high school diploma and a certificate in early childhood development from the community college. But mostly I've learned that sometimes the best therapy is just showing up with love. Richard felt frustrated by her unscientific approach. They needed professionals with advanced degrees, evidence-based treatments, peer-reviewed methodologies. Emma required more than folk wisdom and good intentions. He'd already wasted months on failed therapies. He couldn't afford to waste more time on someone without proper credentials. But something was shifting, even if Richard couldn't see it yet. Week 2. Emma stopped hiding when Grace entered her room. She would peek out from behind furniture, watching Grace with curious eyes, studying this woman who sang softly and never demanded anything from her. Week 3. Emma began sitting closer during story time, still silent but present, in a way she hadn't been with any of the therapists. She would position herself just within arm's reach, close enough to see the pictures clearly. Week 4. Emma started pointing to pictures in books when Grace asked simple questions. A tiny finger indicating which animal she liked best, which princess looked prettiest, which character seemed sad or happy. Week 5. Emma nodded or shook her head in response to Grace's gentle questions. Did she want juice with lunch? Did she like this story? Was she ready for bed? Small gestures but clear communication. Week 6. Emma began arranging her toys in response to Grace's suggestions. Maybe the dolls want to have a tea party, Grace would say, and Emma would carefully set up tiny cups and saucers, positioning her stuffed animals around the child-sized table. The breakthrough signs were subtle, but they were real. Emma was slowly emerging from her shell of grief, responding to Grace's patient, loving presence in ways she never had with the expensive specialists who had tried to fix her. Richard watched from a distance, still skeptical, but beginning to hope. Maybe his mother-in-law was right when she'd said over the phone, sometimes children need a grandmother's heart more than a doctor's brain. Grace never pushed, never demanded, never treated Emma like a problem to be solved. She treated her like a little girl who was hurting and needed time to heal, not from a clinical condition, but from a broken heart. Every child grieves differently, Grace explained to Richard one evening as they watched Emma carefully arrange her dollhouse furniture. Emma isn't broken. She's protecting herself the only way she knows how. When she feels safe enough, she'll come back to us. But she needs to know that it's safe to love again, safe to trust that not everyone she cares about will leave her. Richard wanted to believe her, but after months of silence, he struggled to imagine Emma's voice filling their home again. How could simple kindness succeed where science had failed? He was about to find out. The discovery happened by accident. Grace was helping Emma organize her bookshelf when Sarah's phone slipped out from behind a picture frame. The device had been charging in Emma's room for months, forgotten in the chaos of grief and hospital visits. When Grace powered it on, she found treasured dozens of voice recordings Sarah had made during her final weeks. Lullabies sung in Sarah's gentle voice, bedtime stories recorded when she was too weak to sit up. Loving messages for Emma's future birthdays. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, in Sarah's voice. You are my sunshine, recorded on a difficult day. Hush, little baby, sung with all the love a dying mother could pour into a melody. Grace's eyes filled with tears as she realized this was the missing piece. Emma wasn't just grieving her mother's death, she was missing her mother's voice. The songs that had made her feel safe and loved every night of her short life. When Richard came home that evening, Grace showed him the recordings. Absolutely not, Richard said immediately. Don't you think that will make things worse? The grief counselor specifically said we shouldn't trigger traumatic memories. Emma needs to move forward, not backward. Grace looked at him with gentle understanding. Mr. Morrison, sometimes healing hurts before it helps. Emma isn't moving forward because she's trying to hold on to her mother's memory. What if instead of making her let go, we help her hold on in a healthy way? Richard argued for the professional approach, the evidence-based methods, the expert recommendations about processing grief. But Grace had seen too many children heal through love to doubt her instincts. Trust me, she said quietly. Trust Emma. Trust the love her mother left behind. The critical moment came 3 nights later. Emma woke around midnight, crying from a nightmare. Richard heard her from his bedroom, but felt paralyzed every time he tried to comfort her. Lately, she seemed to withdraw further. Grace went to Emma's room and found the little girl sitting up in bed, clutching her stuffed bunny, and her mother's photo shaking with sobs. All the therapy techniques would say to process the trauma, discuss the feelings, work through the grief methodically. Grace made a different choice. Sitting gently on the edge of Emma's bed, Grace began to sing in a soft, loving voice. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Emma's crying stopped instantly. Her eyes fluttered open wide with recognition and wonder. This song, this gentle care, this loving voice in the darkness, It felt like her mother's love reaching across the impossible distance of death. "Mommy," Emma whispered her first word in 8 months. Grace's heart nearly broke with joy, but she kept her voice calm and gentle. "Mommy loved you so much, sweet pea. She sang this song because she wanted you to know you're her little star, shining bright, even when she can't see you." Emma sat up fully, really looking at Grace for the first time since she'd arrived. "Mommy used to sing that song to me every night." "I know, baby," Grace whispered. "Would you like to sing it together? I think Mommy would love to hear your beautiful voice again." Emma's small, sweet voice joined Grace's, up above the world so high like a diamond in the sky. 8 months of silence broken by a simple lullaby. 8 months of expensive therapy failing where patient love succeeded. Richard appeared in the doorway at 2 a.m., drawn by the sound he'd thought he might never hear again. His daughter's voice clear and beautiful, singing the song her mother had taught her. Tears streamed down his face as he watched Grace and Emma sing together, the nanny creating a bridge between Emma's grief and her healing, honoring Sarah's memory while helping Emma find her voice again. In that moment, Richard understood what all the experts had missed. Emma didn't need to get over her mother's death. She needed to learn how to carry her mother's love forward. She needed someone who understood that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering with love instead of only pain. Grace hadn't replaced Emma's mother. She'd helped Emma keep her mother's love alive in a new way, through song, through care, through the understanding that love doesn't die when people do. As Emma's voice grew stronger with each verse, Richard realized that sometimes the most profound healing comes not from expertise or expensive treatments, but from someone who shows up with patience, love, and the wisdom to honor what came before, while creating space for what comes next. 3 months later, the Morrison penthouse was transformed, not by expensive renovations or new furniture, but by something money couldn't buy: the sound of a child's laughter echoing through halls that had been silent for too long. Emma's voice carried through the rooms as she chatted happily at breakfast, her words tumbling over each other in the eager rush of a child making up for lost time. "Grace, can we bake cookies today? Can we sing the rainbow song? Can we call Grandma and sing to her too? Did you know that butterflies taste with their feet? Can we make butterfly cookies?" The transformation was remarkable. Emma had gone from 8 months of silence to becoming the chattery, curious child she'd been before her mother's death. But there was something deeper in her eyes now, a wisdom that comes from surviving great loss and discovering that love can exist alongside grief. "Tell me about Mommy's garden," Emma would say while they baked together, and Grace would share stories Sarah had told her about the flower beds they'd planted together. Emma would listen intently, adding her own memories. "Mommy said the roses were shy and needed extra hugs. That's why we watered them with the special watering can." Grace had helped Emma understand that remembering her mother wasn't something to fear. It was something to celebrate. They created a memory book together, filling it with photos, drawings, and written stories about Sarah. Emma dictated her favorite memories while Grace wrote them down in careful script. Mommy made the best pancakes shaped like hearts. Mommy knew all the words to every Disney song. Mommy gave the best hugs that made everything better. Richard joined their evening ritual, now something that had become sacred in their household. Each night, the three of them would gather in Emma's room for story time and songs. Sometimes Emma would request her mother's lullabies, sometimes new ones Grace taught her, sometimes silly songs they made up together. The routine always ended the same way. Emma would say, "Good night, Mommy," to Sarah's photo, whispering secrets about her day to the woman who couldn't hear them, but somehow still felt present. Then she'd turn to Grace and say, "Good night, Grace. Thank you for helping me remember how to sing." Emma still grieved her mother, she always would. But now she grieved with love and gratitude for the time they'd had together rather than drowning in the sorrow of what was lost. She understood, in the way children sometimes understand profound truths better than adults, that death doesn't erase love, it just changes its shape. She drew family pictures now that included Grace alongside her parents, instinctively understanding that families can grow even after they're broken. Grace wasn't replacing her mother. She was adding to their family, creating new bonds while honoring old ones. The experts had wanted to fix Emma's silence with techniques and technology, viewing her grief as a problem to be solved rather than a journey to be supported. Grace had understood that Emma didn't need to be cured, she needed to be loved through her healing process. "You saved my family," Richard told Grace one evening as they watched Emma play in the living room, her laughter filling the space where silence had reigned for so long. Emma was putting on a puppet show for her stuffed animals, creating voices and stories with the imagination that had been locked away for months. "No," Grace replied with a gentle smile, watching Emma arrange her audience of toys with careful attention to each one's comfort. "I just reminded Emma that her mother's love is still with her. Love doesn't die, Mr. Morrison. It just changes shape, finds new ways to hold us up when we need it most." The most expensive therapists in Manhattan had tried to fix Emma's silence with cutting-edge techniques and state-of-the-art equipment. Grace had healed it with something far simpler and infinitely more powerful: patience, presence, and the understanding that sometimes the broken places in our hearts don't need to be repaired. They need to be honored, held with love, and allowed to become sources of strength rather than just sorrow. Emma's healing hadn't come from forgetting her pain or moving past her grief. It had come from learning that she could carry her mother's love forward, that grief and joy could coexist. That healing doesn't mean letting go. It means learning how to hold on in a healthy way. Richard watched his daughter bloom back into herself and understood that Grace had given them something priceless: the knowledge that love is stronger than loss. That simple human connection can heal wounds that science cannot touch, and that sometimes the most profound miracles happen not in sterile offices with expensive equipment, but in quiet moments when one heart reaches out to comfort another. If Emma's story touched your heart and you'd like to hear more inspiring stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Every week I share stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things that remind us what truly matters in life. Which moment resonated with you most? Was it Grace's patient approach in those first silent weeks? Emma's breakthrough when she whispered "Mommy" in the darkness? Richard's realization about what truly heals a broken heart? Or the beautiful way this family learned to carry love forward through loss? Share in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing how these stories impact your own lives and remind you of the power of simple, genuine care. Sometimes the most profound healing comes not from experts with impressive credentials or expensive treatments that promise quick fixes, but from someone who simply shows up with love, patience, and the wisdom to understand that we don't heal from grief. We learn to dance with it, to carry it as part of our story, and to let it deepen our capacity for love rather than diminish it.